Hello everybody, I'd like to welcome you to our annual Disability Community Forum. We are the Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities. We're an agency of the City of Boston. We're located in City Hall in the Human Services Department. So I'd like to start off the day with introducing our advisory board. This board is made up of residents of Boston with different disabilities who are from different neighborhoods, and they represent the eyes and ears of the communities to report to me the needs of their neighborhoods so I can report them back to the mayor. And that's really why you're all here today, so you can talk to me about what we're doing well, what we need to work on, and what your priorities are for the upcoming year. So I will kick it off to introduce the board of directors, beginning to my left.
John Winsky. I live in the Fenway South End neighborhood.
Zaria Amir Hosseini, I'm at MGH.
Kimyata Campbell, Hyde Park.
Kyle Robidoux. I live in Roxbury and work at the Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
Could we go back through it, and could you all just maybe speak into the microphone and also tell us where you work and a little bit about what you do in your advocacy? John.
Can you hear me? I'm John Winsky. I'm the Executive Director of Disability Policy Consortium. I've been an advocate for too long. And I live, as I said, in the Fenway, Kenmore City area of Boston.
Sorry.
I'm Zaria Amir Hosseini. I'm the Disability Program Manager at Mass General Hospital, and previous to that, I worked as an advocate with Boston Center for Independent Living.
My name is Kimyata Campbell. I'm a resident from Hyde Park. I currently work at the Boston Public Health Commission. I work around mental health challenges for young children and how do we make policies more effective for families.
And Kyle. So thank you all for coming to, oh, sorry, do you have more to add, Kyle?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. So our board is made up of 13 members. We have some openings right now. We're in the process of recommending candidates to Mayor Walsh. These are all mayoral appointments for 3-year terms. And we meet once a month on the 4th Monday of every month from 5:30 to 7:30 in the evening at City Hall. Our meetings are open to the public, and we encourage people to attend to raise issues that you want us to work on. Again, we're always looking for input and feedback, and we welcome everybody to attend our meetings. Additionally, they are broadcast on TV, live on the city cable channel, and they're streamed on the web with captions, so they're in an accessible format. So now I'd like to introduce my wonderful staff who work with me in City Hall. To the right over against the wall is Jessica Doonan, my Chief of Staff. Thanks, Jessica. We also have Patricia Mendez, who is our Architectural Access Specialist. Patricia reviews BRA developments and special projects in the city to make sure they're in compliance with the Mass AAB laws and regulations. We have Chris Morowski. Chris is our staff support specialist who works on outreach and also helps all the other staff get all their work done. And then we have Sarah Leung, who works in architectural access as well. And I should mention that we have one opening right now on our staff for a staff person for an outreach and engagement specialist. It's posted on our website if anybody's interested. It's open until May 19th. So again, to welcome everybody, I would just like to say that I represent, I'm here today really to represent Mayor Walsh. So I want you to feel like your voices are heard. They're heard by me, and then I in turn bring them to the mayor. So this is really a chance for you to speak to me as a city official and to speak to our board, who are members of the community but act as special employees to the city and to the mayor. So with that, I don't know if everybody saw when they signed in. We encourage everybody to sign in so we have your contact. We can put you on an email list and you can be notified of information from our office. But we also had a sheet where people could sign in if they want to speak, if there are any issues they want to raise. We'll go in order of the sign-in sheet. You don't have to sign in. There's always time for you to speak afterwards, but it makes it a little bit more orderly if anybody wants to sign in. So Jessica has the sheet. She can bring it over to you if you want to raise your hand if anyone hasn't signed in yet and they'd like to sign in. So I don't want to talk too long because I know this is really a chance for me to listen to all of you. I do have a few people in the audience who I know are on a time limit, so I was going to ask that they maybe speak first just to get a conversation started, and then we can always go back and talk. I did give handouts of the advisory board report from last year and from our commission report from last year, just so people know the work that we've been doing, because this is also a chance for us to report back to you about everything we've been doing. So with that, I'd like to open it up to, I know Bill Henning from the Boston Center for Independent Living had a few things to raise, and then I know he has to get to another meeting. So Bill, there's a microphone right in the middle.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak and to go first. I have to go to something for my daughter after she gets out of school. And thanks to the Commission for doing the work that you do every year. My name's Bill Henning. I'm Director of Boston Center for Independent Living. Like Kenyatta, I live in Hyde Park and know all of you and appreciate the work you do. There are many issues out there. I'd just like to highlight two. And there are things I know the Commission has worked on and I hope continues to work on and give very serious attention to. One is the accessibility of cabs, continuing to make sure that there's a fleet of accessible cabs, and continue to work to tie this into the efforts of Uber and Lyft, the ride-hailing companies, to become accessible. This, of course, becomes especially more acute as the MBTA uses Uber and Lyft as a substitute in certain situations, very aggressively, in fact, for the ride. And because of the accessibility problems, we could end up with a very seriously two-tiered transportation system. It's great if you can use Uber and Lyft, and instead of getting a 24-hour advance reservation, you can get a vehicle in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, call anytime. But if you can't get in, it's no good. John Winsky, through the DPC and BCIL and the Disability Law Center, worked with Uber to improve its accessibility. But we've been getting complaints. I know Bill Allen at MILCB raised some complaints, and I think part of the solution can be what the city has been doing on cabs, and I hope you can continue to do that and keep the community involved. Also on housing. Housing clearly is one of the biggest needs in the city for anyone who isn't wealthy, really. So I hope the Commission can continue to support the development of affordable and accessible housing. And we know that you've been working with community members on a plan to expand the requirement for accessible units that are financed by the city. We'd love to see that come to fruition. My understanding is the mayor signed off. We'd just like to see that put into action ASAP, because there is such a dearth of affordable and accessible units. And also, if feasible, try to expand the city's repair programs, home modification programs for elders into the disability community. I think that's really important. Many of us have advocated for that. We're in a desperation situation right now. We know homelessness has increased. We know many folks are stuck in nursing homes for other lack of places to go. We know people are moving out of the city. We know people are couch surfing. We know people are stuck inside their units. They can't get up to the third floors. You know, they may be stuck on the third floor of a 3-decker and get out once a week, or they slide down on their rear end to get in and out. It's a real desperate situation. It's not just folks in wheelchairs. It's people with COPD, back injuries, all kinds of mobility challenges. There are many other issues. And this, of course, housing cuts across all strata of the disability community, people with intellectual disabilities, mental illness. I really encourage the Commission to keep pressuring DND in the city. Not that they're not working hard, but we've got to be on the forefront. And when you look at homelessness, it's really in great elements of disability community. Thank you. Disability issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. So I can take that in two parts. First of all, about transportation access with cabs, Uber, and Lyft. So you're right, the MBTA is using Lyft and Uber as a part of the pilot program to try to help their business model economically. We know that each vehicle ride costs between $35 and $45, whereas they're paying $13 per ride for a Lyft or Uber. However, the vehicles themselves from Uber and Lyft are not accessible to people who use wheelchairs or scooters. So we have a lot to deal with in that issue. We have been working for a long time now with the city's Hackney office to try to improve accessibility of cabs, because we have 100 WAVE vehicles, which stands for Wheelchair Accessible Vehicles. However, 5 years ago, only one of those WAVE vehicles was ADA compliant. So over the past 5 years, we've worked really hard with the owners of the cabs to improve that to almost 50%. Right now, we have 44 WAVE vehicles that are ADA compatible, compliant, and after the spring inspection, which happens in June, we believe we'll have 5 more, so that will be 49 total wheelchair accessible vehicle cabs. So that's a huge improvement in 5 years. Our goal originally 5 years ago was to have 100% of the 100 WAVEs ADA compatible, compliant. However, Uber hit the scene in 2013, which really came out of the blue to cab owners. So now cab owners face so much competition. You know, some of them are basically being faced with being wiped out. So I think the problem is even greater than just getting access to Uber and Lyft, because if the cab companies go out of business, then we're really in trouble. So we're really trying to work with the city, with the taxi owners, with Uber, to try to make sure that everybody stays in business and has an equitable, accessible model. So we have had some talks with Uber, ongoing talks, nothing of late. And I do know that John Winsky has been involved with them. Is there anything that you can update us on, John?
No, we're basically in a holding pattern, and waiting for something to come out.
Okay. We did meet with a person who was interested in developing a model where her company would purchase 4 to 6 accessible minivans and then rent them out to Uber drivers. So the city's has some preliminary talks about that, but again, nothing has come to fruition yet. So I do, along with John, we're sort of in a little bit of a holding pattern, and during that time, we will continue to improve access with the cabs. But I do agree that it's a vital issue for transportation, particularly in terms of equity, because we can't really split disabilities up the way that has been happening with the ride, because we need to have everybody be able to use all the ride services. And I understand the T's position economically, but we still really need to push to have accessible vehicles available through Uber and Lyft. So I would say stay tuned. We will have more information hopefully in the coming months. And if everybody signs in, we can sign you up for our email newsletter where we put updates about these sorts of things. And we also have a brochure outside which lists the accessible cabs right now. And because they weren't all ADA compliant, what we did 5 years ago was we measured each cab and we gave them each a rating of A through F. So all the cabs that you see, the WAVE cabs, if you look on the rear, there's a wheelchair symbol, and next to the symbol there's a letter grade. And a letter grade of A is totally ADA compliant. B is not compliant, but a lot of wheelchairs will fit in, particularly power wheelchairs. C is kind of a 50-50, you might fit in, you might not. D means most power wheelchairs won't fit in, maybe some manual chairs will fit in. And F means basically a wheelchair probably isn't getting in unless it's a youth wheelchair. So you can take a brochure and that will list which medallions are accessible, the medallion numbers of the accessible cabs, and then you can call, the phone numbers for the different cabs are in there, you can call and request those cabs. We also are working to get these cabs on the Uber platform, so that if you do call the Uber app, you may be able to get one of these cabs. That's not finished at this point, so I don't want you to expect that on the Uber platform, but it is something that we're working with. So then to talk about housing, another point that Bill raised, we do have some people here from the city's Office of Fair Housing Equity and Department of Neighborhood Development. And I know they're working on a fair housing assessment, and this may be a good time for you to just say a few words. Janine Anzola and your colleague Robert Gerhardt, would you like to speak at the mic and just give us an update on the project you're working on?
The city has just begun working on an assessment of fair housing, and the assessment, a major chunk of that is on...
Could you speak into the mic a little bit more?
A major chunk of that assessment is on access for persons with disabilities. And this is a plan that we're putting together with the Boston Housing Authority, the Fair Housing Commission, Boston Public Health Commission, and a series of neighborhood organizations, civil rights and fair housing organizations. And I don't want to take a lot of time here, but I'm here in part because I wanted to hear what folks had to say specifically on housing issues, but also on other access to opportunity issues. And I'd like to invite anybody that's interested. I have a couple brochures that I could hand out, or cards if you're interested in participating.
Hi, my name is Janina Azalota. I'm the director of the Mayor's Office of Fair Housing and Equity, and we investigate housing discrimination. So we're working on the assessment. I just want to highlight that there are some other city agencies here too that are working on the assessment. So Boston Housing Authority is here. Boston Planning and Development Agency is also working with us. If folks have issues of housing discrimination, denial of reasonable accommodation, I will also leave cards at the front. And Jessica and some of the other Disability Commission staff can connect you with my office.
Thank you, Janine. And Bill also mentioned that we've been working on some policies to increase housing opportunities for people with disabilities. So the mayor came out with a plan in 2014 called Housing Boston 2030, which was a plan looking at the needs of Boston housing over the next 15 years. And when we looked at the plan, we realized that one segment of the population that had been left out was housing for persons with disabilities who were non-elderly. Because a lot of times, accessible housing gets lumped into the field of people who are elderly. But we know that being elderly comes with certain categorical requirements that people with disabilities who aren't elderly don't often meet. So we really wanted to take a closer look at this category of people who weren't over 65 but still needed accessible units. So we convened a task force together called the Disability Housing Task Force. We met for a period of 18 months, and there were representatives from the Department of Neighborhood Development, from Spalding, from MBHP, a number of other groups, and also some individuals with disabilities, residents of Boston. So we met and talked about the needs of this population, and we came up with a plan of recommendations to submit to Mayor Walsh, and they were basically broken down into 3 categories. The first was to increase the supply of housing, so that means to build more accessible housing and to increase the number of units that were available for people. The second goal was to increase the to simplify the process of gaining housing, to help people through the maze of what it's like to try to get housing in Boston. And the third goal was to support people who have recently been housed, as far as home modification loans or different programs that allow them to keep their housing. People may be coming from homelessness, maybe coming out of incarceration. So we know that there are a lot of issues to maintain housing once you get housing. So we came up with a series of broad goals, these 3 broad goals, and then we also broke them down into specific targeted outcomes that we'd like to see. So we met with the mayor 2 weeks ago, and he gave us the green light for the recommendations. And we're in the process now of working with the BDPA, which is the new name for the old BRA, and also the Department of Neighborhood Development. And some of the highlights from this program, which will be implemented soon, are that we are going to increase the number of built-out units, built out to ADA compliance. Currently, they're required to have 5% built-out units, but we're going to increase that to 10%. So there'll be that many more accessible units built out. We're also going to require that a certain number of the built-out units be included in the inclusionary development policy, which means a certain number of the accessible units will also be mandated to be affordable. Because right now there's no requirement that some of the accessible units be affordable. So now whenever they build accessible units, we know at least one of them and more, we're trying to work on the percentage right now, will be listed as affordable. Because we've heard stories from developers who say, we build all these ADA compliant units and then nobody applies for them. Well, maybe because people with disabilities can't get jobs often and then they can't afford a $700,000 condo. So we wonder why they're not, being purchased. So we're working very closely with Robert and Janine, and also Sheila Dillon and Brian Golden from the BDPA to get this policy summed up, finished, and then announced by Mayor Walsh. So stay tuned in the next few weeks. We're going to have a final meeting of the task force, and then we'll be announcing this policy, but it's something we're really excited about. Because I would say housing is one of the biggest issues that we hear about in our office. And as Bill said, you know, people are forced to leave the city, to live with relatives. And I mean, we haven't even talked really about the homelessness population. And we know that people with mental disabilities, emotional disabilities often fall into those categories. And even the homeless shelters, we know people with physical disabilities have issues navigating the shelters. And it's just a really big issue. So I appreciate you bringing it up, and please stay tuned for more information in the upcoming weeks. So with that, I just want to go back and let people know, I should have said at the beginning, but this broadcast, this meeting is being filmed for broadcast by Boston Cable. So just so everybody knows, there is a chance if you speak up, you may be on camera. If everybody has, you know, concerns about that, just so you know. So we can go down the list now for people who signed up to speak. You can ask questions of myself or the board. Jessica, you want to read off the first name?
Great, thank you. So just echoing what the commissioner said, if there is an issue that, or a concern that you have about being on film, please come up to me afterwards, and we can see what we can do about that. I'm going to go simply from top to bottom on one sheet, and then top to bottom on the next sheet. First one I have is David Vieira.
And while David's coming up to the mic, I just want to let people know that there are some refreshments along the back table. There's some appetizers, some drinks, and bathrooms are out the hall, women's room to the left, and the men's room to the right.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Vieira. I live in Hyde Park. I've been the president of the Citywide Friends of the Boston Public Library since 2001. I took 2 years off, but then my new president moved to New Jersey, so I'm back. During that time, since 2001, I've attended almost all of the trustees' meetings of the Boston Public Library and have frequently brought up the inaccessibility of the Central Library building in Copley Square. And I was always told that they had a problem building an access ramp because of the landmark status of the Boston Public Library. So 3 years ago, when they started construction of the new $78 million fully accessible wing, they put a temporary access ramp on the Copley Square side of the library. So that sort of torpedoed the question that they couldn't put a ramp up because of landmark access. Well, the $78 million addition is finished now, and on Friday, they are pulling down the so-called temporary access ramp. And the Copley Square entrance is used by a lot of people getting off public transportation at the Back Bay side of Copley Square. Now you're all going to have to go around the building and down Boylston Street to enter through the new entrance. Tourists use the Copley Square entrance. People with strollers and wheelchairs use the Copley Square entrance. Anybody who received one of these raspberry-colored sheets, please take it home with you and email the mayor and the president of the library and the trustees. All of the email addresses are on the form. The Boston Public Library has to start to own the issue of building a permanent access ramp on the Copley Square side of the building. There's lots of really smart architects in this town that can sit down with the Landmark Commission and find a way to do this without messing up the architecture of the building. If it's a matter of looking pretty or looking accessible, I vote for accessible. If anybody needs one of these raspberry-colored sheets, they can come to me and I will be glad to give them one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I know that the Boston Public Library just underwent an $80 million renovation.
78.
$78 million renovation. Thank you.
Who's counting?
Okay. So I know that they have improved access exponentially in the old and the new building, and we are.
Excuse me, not the old building.
Well,
The new building.
okay. Well, we are aware that the ramp was coming down this coming week. My architectural access specialist has been involved with some of the renovations. A lot of these were planned before Patricia came on board, but I can ask her to just give a brief update on what she knows about this issue. Patricia?
Hello, everyone. What I've been involved with the Boston Public Library lately has been the buttons for the operators that actuate the doors that connect the old building with the new building, and also some issues with the elevator in the new building that was sometimes malfunctioning. I have been reporting to property management, and I've heard back from them that some issues have been resolved. Last time I was at the public library, the elevator was working properly, and the buttons were also working properly. And other concerns on those buttons is that there were some planters placed in front of those buttons. So I also reported that complaint, and we keep communicating with them as the complaints come in.
What about that horrible lift that connects the new building to the old building, that Canadian lift? Have they fixed that, or they can't do that?
Can you repeat the question on the mic?
I'm sorry, what about the lift that connects the new building to the old building, which is absolutely horrible, that Canadian elevator thing, which is a nightmare? Are they gonna, has that been part of the ADA requirements as they've been renovating the building?
Let me check on that. I'm not familiar with that.
Can I address that, please?
Yeah, you can come back up to the mic.
Hey, Dave. Oh, thanks. There is a new elevator that replaces that old clunky thing that used to be right outside the loading dock. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, that's been decommissioned. There is a new glass elevator. As you walk in the lobby, it's to the left behind the circulation desk. And it's a really pretty elevator, but here's another issue. I brought it up yesterday at an Audit and Finance Committee meeting of the Boston Public Library. There's no voice enunciator on a brand new, squeaky clean 2017 elevator, but it is there. I recommend you go in and try it. You will find that that is a major improvement.
So I just want to let people know, too,
Thank you.
a big reason for this forum today is so that we can hear your concerns. We may not have the answers right now. We'll tell you what we do know. But things like this, the concerns about the library, the temporary ramp, we will definitely keep a list. And like Patricia said, she'll follow up on it and find out the details of why it's not happening or whatever we can find out. And we can report back to people. So please, if you have questions, follow up and give us your email so we can let you know personally, as well as we'll issue a report afterwards with all the questions from the forum and just give the information that we found out. And if any board members want to add anything in during these conversations, please feel free to jump in, because some of you may have information on your own as well. User information or information as a board member. And before we have the next speaker, I just want to recognize some other staff who are here. I know there's some City of Boston staff who came in. We have people from Fair Housing and Equity and D&D, like we said. I also saw someone from our Human Resources Department and Veteran Services, the Parks Department. Giselle, thank you. Is someone here from Human Resources still here at the back? Hi. And I don't have my glasses on. And also Parks Department. Someone was here? Oh, there you are. Okay. So if questions come up for these departments, if you want to jump in and comment, you can, but please don't feel like you're on the spot. And is there any other city department here that I missed?
I believe we'd like to acknowledge that Immigrant Advancement is here, as well as a representative from Culline's office as well.
Oh, great, excellent.
And the Boston
BHA,
Housing
wonderful,
Authority.
welcome.
Wonderful.
Thank you all. Okay, we can go to the next speaker.
Great, so the next speaker we have is Dawn Summerfield.
Good afternoon, Kristen, members of the board, public. I have a couple of comments, one question, or actually two questions. One is I support David's remark, we should save at all costs the accessible entrance at the McKim building. And I do have a question for David, actually three. Is P. Carver a man or a woman?
Pamela Carver is the clerk of the trustees.
But is...
She is a woman.
Thank you. Next item, it involves Cambridge, I'm sorry, but it's a key question. I think Mr. Sampson is here. Why is it there is a cherry picker, also known as a lift, on that pedestrian ramp going to the upper busway at Harvard?
Don, I'm over here.
Sorry?
Sorry, you asking about a cherry picker?
Yes, that I've sent you
Can we
numerous
just get
emails,
a mic?
photographs. Without response.
I haven't got an answer on that yet, but I will follow up with our maintenance department and see if they...
Oh, thank you so much.
What's the issue, Don?
Sorry?
What is the issue?
There's a lift, also known as a cherry picker, on the pedestrian ramp going up from the upper busway from the paid lobby at Harvard T station to the upper busway.
Okay. Is that a new feature or is it temporary?
Been there for a while,
I think that's a
actually.
piece of equipment that they use for maintenance to access the ceiling
Okay.
tiles. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
But can I ask another question? Why didn't you ever respond to my various emails, photographs, and to your boss never responded?
I apologize for that, Don.
Thank you,
I'll do a
Rob.
better job next time. You're welcome.
Okay.
Thanks, Don.
You're so welcome, thank you.
All right, next we have Liam Flanagan.
Hi, just curious, maybe with a clap of hands, how many people are here from the visually impaired blind community? It's very often underrepresented, and even within that, there's not a lot of advocacy. I wasn't on my agenda when I walked in, but I want to shoot out a comment. I hear from a lot of people at support groups and various places that they're being denied access to Uber and Lyft because they have a guide dog. I'm hearing that too much. My big issue, as Jessica here knows, when I moved into the city, when I was first declared legally blind and was going into housing, was getting audible traffic signals. This is a very dangerous city to walk around. They haven't heard from me lately because I moved up the top of the hill, and the only reason I'm alive or not seriously injured is because I have peripheral vision, and I'm in a place where there's usually a lot of pedestrians crossing with me. But the inaccessibility to the traffic department and their lack of accountability has been very distressful to me. Trying to get either a constituent or a professional involved when they're planning these intersections. What you have is fully sighted people making decisions for people who are blind or visually impaired. Example, where I live, it tells me it's okay to cross Washington Street at the same time that a left turn arrow turns on Commonwealth Ave. They make the turn, they're coming right at me legitimately. And I've been told on more than one occasion, oh yeah, we'll get down there in a week or two and we'll work with you. But it doesn't happen. And that's been my problem for several years now. But the other just came up in my mind as fellow was talking about that cherry picker type of item being in a rampway. There are a lot of dangerous, hazardous things around this city, one of which I encountered on the way up here today, because I didn't know where number 120 was, so I walked from Boylston Street. Some sort of construction in the middle of the sidewalk, with really nothing at all to indicate to a blind or visually impaired person they're about to step into some hazard. And this community is very not often represented in those regards. And I think that's pretty, oh, one last thing. If anybody is having any trouble like I am these days, getting access to their medical records or lab results because of what I'm told is called EPIC, here you go. Make your voice heard. Call Mount Auburn Hospital at least, but I am really throwing my weight into this. I can't get my own lab results, even talking to an IT person on the phone who doesn't really understand accessibility issues. Because very often, even in multiple disability environments, the blind community is not always represented and their issues are not always looked after. Thank you. Let's speak, advocate. I've been, for example, someone told me, similar to something I heard here, oh, it was terrible. I was in there was no elevator announcement buttons, and I was all alone in the elevator. I was really scared. Did you say anything on the way out? No.
Thank you, Liam. Just to address a few of your points, I know that you work with our office frequently, and we relay your concerns to BTD as far as the signal crossings. And many of them are in progress now with some redesign happening on Commonwealth Ave. But to address the temporary barriers during construction, we do meet with the contractors at the beginning of each season and emphasize the need for compliant barricades during construction work. But if you come across them, please call 311 or call our office, because we will send people out immediately to make them safe. So again, I apologize that that's happening. The city works with numerous contractors, and we do train them, and we are adamant that they make compliant barricades, but we know it doesn't always happen. Does anyone have any on the board members?
Liam, this is Zari. I work as the Disability Program Manager at MGH, and I've heard actually from some of our patients with visual issues that patient gateway is not accessible for them. So I really would like you to encourage you to go to your patient care services at your hospital. I don't know what hospital you go to, but we've started a focus group at Mass General just to hear what those issues are and actually have the patient give us feedback about what's not accessible as far as both our websites and patient gateway. And hopefully we can work with IT to make those changes.
And also I know you said that often the blind community is underrepresented, but I feel like we really do make an effort to include that disability in all of our advocacy efforts. And we recently had a staff person retire who worked for the city for almost 30 years, and he was blind. So I know that we do pay attention to those issues in our office and also in our advocacy. So I don't feel like it's underrepresented in our thinking on access and in our work, but we do encourage always feedback from any member of any disability that feels underrepresented. And to follow up on that, I wanted to let people know, out on the table in the hall, we have a new form that we're offering people to fill out. It's a diversity self-identification form, and it lists factors such as disability, gender, race, ethnicity, and it's a completely anonymous form survey. We are asking people to fill it out if they're comfortable with it, to let us get a sense of what disabilities we serve, what disabilities we need to pay more attention to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our residents. Mayor Walsh is really focused on equity and representing all of Boston's residents. So if you're interested in filling out this anonymous survey, it will just help us get a sense of who we're reaching and who we need to reach and what efforts we need to focus on. So please feel free to fill that out before you leave.
Is that Kristen speaking now?
Yes, this is Kristen. Sorry. And the other issues that you brought up as far as APS crossings, I know that you're working with Patricia in my office on those, so she'll stay in contact with you with any updates on those.
I've just begun to. I met her today. I stopped because I gave up, and I moved up the top of the hill to a safer place. But I am now starting to use an intersection that is one of the most dangerous in the area, which is where Kelton Street becomes Warren, crossing Commonwealth Ave. They put some signals in there, but they are far from adequate. And now that I'm using that once a week again, some people are going to be hearing from me.
Okay, thanks,
The
Leanne.
promises that I heard, oh yeah, we'll be down, we'll get in touch with you, we're down there in a week or two, within the next week, and we'll look at it. Never happened.
Actually, that brings up a good point, and it's something that I want to let people know. Oftentimes, when we get complaints, it takes time to rectify them, whether it's if it's a curb cut, if it has to go out to bid because it's a public project and redesign. Like I know there was an issue at the public garden for a long time with the ramp, and it was in design, it was in the bidding process, but it still took about 2 years to complete. So sometimes it's not that the city is doing nothing, it's just that it's in process and it takes time to actually get fixed. And I know with some of the APS signals, in order to look at the intersection, to do the engineering, the traffic engineering, it does take time. So I ask you to, understand that oftentimes these fixes aren't going to happen overnight, but they are. All the planning that we do for any future work is all completely ADA compliant in design and hopefully in installation. So I just tell people that as a little FYI that we do work on things. Sometimes the results take a little longer to actually be achieved.
I'm talking about when a person tells you on the phone personally that yes, we'll get back to you in a week or two, and we will meet you down there at that intersection to describe it. And then 6 weeks later, you're calling somebody in one of the offices saying, are you still waiting? Are you still waiting? And as far as the last thing you said, you'll remember when I was calling your office, what I was asking for was, please tell me when this assessment is taking place, so that a constituent like myself or a professional, for example, Meg Robinson from the Fish for the Blind, would be there so the blind community has some input.
I know that
get that answer.
BTD does work with Meg frequently, but I do appreciate those comments.
Yeah,
Was there?
Thank you.
Great. Now we have next up Olivia. And there's a mic right over by Hank.
Hello.
Hi, Olivia.
All right. My name is Olivia Richard. I am a constituent from Brighton. I'm a disability rights activist. I attended the forum for Boston 2030. I attended the urban planning forum where they discussed basically what's needed in order to design such a broad plan. And I asked, well, are we front-loading accessibility and access into this plan?
Which plan was it, housing?
No, the whole plan, Boston 2030 itself. Are we front-loading access into the whole thing? So that way, when we begin to execute it, we know how the law works right now, is a building has to be erected fully and permitted for occupancy before an asshole like me can launch an ADA lawsuit, if it's not correct. And we have to actually be aggrieved. Well, the thing is, construction is not Legos. We can't take the building down and reconstruct it. So if we're not going to include access in the plan to begin with, how can someone, when we begin to filter down to actual construction, how can they think about that and include it so that we aren't in lawsuit territory? So we aren't building $78 million infrastructure in the Boston Public Library, but forgetting that you need a voice to tell people in an elevator what floor they're on.
Did you bring this up at the meeting?
I did.
And what was the response?
We've never thought about it.
I find that hard to believe because I'm in all those meetings.
No, Ted Landsmark told me at the meeting, you can go through the thing because it was filmed on BNN as well. he was like, that's a really good question. I haven't heard it phrased that way.
Well, I don't doubt that he said that, but I want to emphasize that accessibility is absolutely considered from the get-go. And one of the things that we did recently, about 2 years ago, was we instituted what we call an accessibility checklist, which is an 8-page document, and it goes through very thoroughly all of the accessibility elements in any building which is being designed to be built or with a major reconstruction, large-scale development and small-scale development. And what the accessibility checklist strives for is what we call ideal design, because no project in any other category other than accessibility strives to only meet compliance. Like with LEED, engineering, and energy, everyone strives for like gold star ratings and strives for like optimal design. So my desire is to make sure accessibility is never just meeting the minimum standard. It's to be made ideal conditions. And some of the examples I give to staff who may not understand in other departments like BRA or BDPA is something like, well, what does an equitable entrance mean? If there's a ramp, then people can get in. And I say, okay, but that's not really equitable when you have a family coming in and one's in a wheelchair, and that person in the wheelchair has to go to the right while the rest of the family goes to the left. Everybody should be able to enter together. So that's why we would advocate for a level entrance so everybody can go in together. Because if you separate a ramp and stairs when there's no reason to, then that's not the best ideal design we can have. So we emphasize visitability, which means that all the units that aren't built out for access are still have basic accessibility features, like wide doorways and a bathroom on the first floor that someone in a wheelchair could get in. Because we all know that just because you may not live in a unit, people who live in standardized units have family members and friends who maybe want to come in and visit. So the accessibility checklist really pushes the developers to think, before they even make designs, to think about accessibility, front-load it for sure. So that's everything from accessible routes to accessible T-stations to the building. They look at curb cuts, they look at sidewalks, they look at all the entrances to the building, because right now only one entrance is, I believe, I'm not a code expert, but I believe only one entrance is required to be accessible. Yeah. We ask that all the entrances are accessible, and if they're not, we ask for justification why they're not. We look at elevator routes, we look at circulation routes, we look at roof decks, we look at terraces and patios. In standardized units, oftentimes you'll see a lip or a step onto a patio. We ask those to be eliminated. So it's a really thorough, detailed 8-page checklist. It's available on the BDPA website if you'd like to see it. So
I have.
Okay, great. So I mean, I like that's what I mean. I find it hard to believe that someone would think that we don't emphasize accessibility. That person may just not be in on the loop. But I can tell you, my architectural access staff, Sarah and Patricia, they go to every scoping session. They go to pre-file hearings. They meet with the BDPA on a daily basis. So we are definitely in the loop.
Yeah, that's talking about now construction. I'm talking about front-loading it into the plan itself for 2030, for the entire plan.
Which staff member was involved in that one? Do we know, Jessica? Is that Patricia? I'm not sure which. There are so many different plans. I know there was housing, there was Boston Creates, there's Go Boston. So I'm not sure which one this is. I don't know of a Boston 2030, just general plan.
Yeah, it's the overall urban plan. Like,
is it Go Boston?
Yeah.
Go Boston, okay.
It was Imagine Boston 2030.
Imagine Boston, okay, yep.
Yeah.
So yes, we are definitely involved in that. I don't know if there's anything else specific, like what did you say? It's good for buildings being built, but you said something else.
But I meant it as, like, there's more than just ramps, curb cuts, whatever. You have to think about it in terms of what are the needs of the community in 2030. And that might be more than just ramps, curb cuts, accessible entrances, so what? We have a burgeoning autistic population that are adversely affected by fluorescent lighting and sensory issues. We've got visually impaired and blind community that are, with technology, needs to catch up with the plans.
John, did you have
things
something
like
to say?
that need to be included in any future plan. and it needs to be flexible enough that these are required when they come about, not just, not put in afterward.
No, we do definitely emphasize sensory disabilities as well. I know we've talked about, we've looked at design plans for even populations of people who are deaf and use sign language, that they have space to sign to each other, wider aisles when walking so they can carry on conversations. Certainly, people who are blind have unique needs.
I know I represented the commission on the transportation aspect of 2030. And I can tell you we were talking about everything from how you get from one neighborhood to the other and we were covering everything from rollerblading to walking to wheeling to the aging population to self-driving automobiles to buses. So it was always in the discussion, and I think there's a growing recognition that there are many, many ways people ambulate and get around. And I think luckily for us, more and more of them involve wheels. Talking about mothers with baby carriages and people rollerblading and skateboarding and biking and I think there's a great deal of awareness is increasing. We're not there yet. But I can also tell you as people in the room are getting older, lights beginning to dawn. There's one or two neighborhoods in the city who aren't quite getting it, and I think you know where I mean. But I'll say Beacon Hill.
Actually, that was my next question, was where are we on the Beacon Hill curb cut issue? Because I'm sick of having to throw myself into Beacon Street to get to the State House from the bus.
As everyone may not be aware, but the city launched its sidewalk policy about 4 years ago. It's a redesigned policy which goes by a national initiative known as Complete Streets, which separates the sidewalk into 3 zones: pedestrian, curb zone, and frontage zone. So the pedestrian zones are now required to be only built in concrete, smooth concrete, for a 5 feet minimum path of travel. All furniture and brick and any other ornamental elements can go in the furnishing zone or the curb zone, but not in the path of travel. So Beacon Hill did give us some resistance on the concrete. When it came to the curb ramps, that's where we started in Beacon Hill. So the Department of Public Works did install 3 or 4 curb cuts, and then Beacon Hill basically took the city to court to stop the work. So right now it's in the process, it's still in the courts, and we hope it will be decided soon, but it's been at a stall for about 2 years now. So we are continuing to hold the line. The mayor's been very supportive of our efforts, but it is another historical issue where people, prefer aesthetics to accessibility, and we're really trying to fight that.
But that's then becomes fair housing.
One second, Liam.
Thank you.
One second.
I thought you were finished, I'm sorry.
But that then becomes a fair housing issue, it becomes a transportation access issue, it becomes an everything issue. That cuts off access to my government.
That's why we're working on it, believe me. We're on your side. We are working on it.
I mean, has anyone made that argument?
Yes, we have city lawyers who've been in court making all those arguments. So yes, we have. But thank you.
That
Jessica?
remark I made, though, I never thought of that, or we never thought of that. That is not as unusual as you may think. It may sound, frightening, but it is not. When people say, oh, we hadn't thought of that. Thank you for bringing that up, Olivia.
Yeah, it was said to me.
That's more unusual than you may think.
Great, thank you everyone. So in the interest of time, just to make sure that everybody's comments, I've got about 8 or 10 more people on this list. So I'm just gonna ask that we try and keep our comments to as short as you can make it, possibly with the understanding that some things require a bit more explaining. So next we have Jerry Boyd.
Thank you, yes. My initial questions were primarily around transportation access. So you know, Bill's earlier remarks and the Commission's earlier remarks handled that a lot. My only follow-up to that would be, it's great that we're having more and more wave accessible taxis. You know, and I can certainly get that list on the flyer, but what's been the response? Have you gotten any feedback from people who have tried to call them up? You know, are they pretty much on demand, or do they only work certain times, or what kind of feedback have you gotten on them so far?
We hear mixed feedback. We certainly hear stories where people have waited for a long time and the cabs have not shown up. I can only say that the Hackney office, which is the Boston Police Department that oversees the cabs, is really, really vigilant about staying on top of that, because wave drivers are required to pick up wave calls. They can't just ignore them, and that's all tracked. So if they do ignore a wave call or don't show up for a wave call, they can get penalized, fined, they can get their license taken away for a certain period of time. So Hackney is very vigilant about that, but at the same time, we do hear stories of that happening. So again, we do keep working with the cab companies, with the cab owners and the cab drivers to try to ensure that that doesn't happen. But even from personal experience, I know that it does.
Sure. And my other question concerns recreational activities for people with disabilities. I do know that your email lists different community events, and you know, I often see wheelchair, you know, basketball listed, you know, in Charlestown. But what is the city doing to provide other recreational opportunities or highlight other recreational opportunities for people with disabilities?
That's a really, really good point. We do hear a lot about access. We work with Access Sports and Recreation, Boston. Is that the name of it? And
we work with Access Rec Boston. We work with Spalding. We work with a couple other organizations as well to ensure that, one, that their events are being publicized, and also that if there are opportunities for partnership, that we are taking advantage of those as well.
Yes, I do want people to realize that we're a very small staff. We only have 5 staff. We have 7 positions, but only 5 staff members at this time. So there are so many things that we want to do, and recreation is definitely one of the things that we want to get more involved with. So we're hoping to push that and move that more towards the future. But that being said, we can certainly try to pay more attention to listings, to events that are happening, and put them in our newsletter and publicize them. Well, we do it now, but we can certainly, you know, keep an eye out for that. And we do also work with Joe Walsh, who's here. I know he keeps pushing the envelope for more accessible sports in Boston Public Schools and Boston Centers for Boston BCYF, Boston Centers for Youth and Families. Did you have anything to add, Joe?
No, just that we too are looking for the 100% gold standards, best practices for sports and recreation across the city for people who have disabilities, not just the minimum standard as well. And Kristen and Jessica have been great partners on that.
Great, thank you very much.
Jerry. Oh, actually, someone from Boston Parks and Recs is here. She can comment. Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Lauren Bryant, and I'm one of the project managers for Boston Parks. Just wanted to really quickly let everybody know that along with a lot of the other city departments, accessibility and inclusion is something that we're working really hard on. I'm in the design and construction unit, so we really look at it.
I don't know if that mic's on.
Yeah. Is that better?
Nope.
What about now? Yes. There we go. Okay. So once again, Lauren Bryant from Boston Parks and Recreation. I'm in the design and construction unit. So I really look at everything, like you're saying, from the beginning in terms of our planning process and in terms of actually designing the park itself. In terms of programming, I can't talk to our programming. That's not my department, but I'm certainly going to bring that back and make sure that they are thinking about that, because I don't get involved with that. But I really wanted to let you guys know inclusion is something I'm very interested in, and I'm making sure that we get that more into our parks, not just accessibility like you've talked about. And just because wheelchair basketball was just mentioned in Charlestown, just wanted to let everybody know the opening in about 3 weeks at the Hardeman Park in Brighton. We just put in a wheelchair height basketball hoop that we've been working with the Oak Square YMCA and trying to get some of that programming for their inclusive programming as well. So we are doing a lot of that, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody afterwards to talk about some of the other projects that we're doing, which are also really exciting. But again, it's not the programming part, but I can talk about the stuff that we're actually doing in the design of parks.
And we can look into the programming that will be around that new basketball hoop, and that's great to know. That's something that we can push out, that information. And also, I know that there is a Power Wheelchair Soccer League, and they do use space at the Tobin.
We do, yes.
Did people have comments on that?
No.
Yeah, if you can just grab the mic.
Yeah. For those that don't know, there's an adaptive rec fair on June 3rd at Archesani Park.
Great. Adaptive Rec Fair on June 3rd at Artesani Park. Okay, Jessica?
Commissioner, I have a quick question just to follow up on, I know that BPS has adaptive PE teachers, but does BCYF have an adaptive department within their programming staff?
They used to have someone who worked on that. It was sort of his little just personal interest, pet project. He left the city about 4 years ago, and I don't know who's stepped into that role. Do you know? No, okay. But we can look into that.
I know that currently, right now, BCYF is doing an overall look at their programs and their services and identifying key stakeholders and key individuals within BCYF who will kind of lead initiatives like this under the new management under BCYF. And now we have Jamie Cohen.
Hi, thank you. So I've been looking a lot into the opportunities for students with disabilities, and in particular students with intellectual disabilities, to access opportunities in higher education. And I've seen a lot with the Inclusive Concurrent Enrollment Program, the ICE program, but that is only for students with intellectual disabilities up to the age of 21 under IDEA. So I'm curious what's been going on to eliminate some of the barriers, especially the cost of a lot of the programs out there, especially in Boston and in Massachusetts. So what's been going on to try and eliminate those barriers and also expand other opportunities for these students?
Thank you. That's a great question. Education, pre-college education is something that we, as a department, haven't done a lot with because BPS is such a huge agency of the city, and they have different departments, everything, from special ed to inclusion, and different schools have inclusion programs. We definitely work with them, but not on that level as far as, those specific questions you asked. One thing I can say that my office does do is we do summer internships for youth with disabilities, and that could prepare them, potentially for some sort of college program, for employment. We know that in the 18 to 22 age, transition age is huge for students, and that's something that we do want to look more at. Again, the fact that we only have 5 staff and BPS is so huge, I think it's going to be more making connections rather than work that we can do directly, other than the internships. But during the internships, we focus on youth, mainly from the Boston Public Schools. We offer them 6-week internships. We partner with other agencies, BCIL, Mass Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Mass Commission for the Blind, and then just some residents that we know who maybe have children who are looking for internships. And we do 5 or 6 per summer for BPS or for youth 18 to 22 students. And we also have an annual event in October every year called Disability Mentoring Day. And we do try to include some youth in that, where that brings them into City Hall for a day of job shadowing and mentoring and looking at the whole employment world. As far as college, we really haven't done a lot with that, but thank you for raising it. It's something we can put on our agenda. And do you work in an agency that deals with that?
I'm in graduate school right now and focusing a lot on special education policy and in particular higher education. I know UMass Boston has the Institute for Community Inclusion, so I've looked into that, but I just haven't found a lot of programs in particular in Boston and in public institutions in Massachusetts, that are accessible for all students with disabilities. Like I said, the one that I have found is only for students up to the age of 22, but it would be great to see if we could expand some of those opportunities.
And actually, this is a good time to point out that we have a fellow working in our office this summer, a fellowship program through the Harvard Rappaport Institute, and her name's Leah, and she's going to be starting next week. And the project she's going to be working on is an accessibility priority survey for Boston. So we are going to start to look at different priorities that people have, and if this is something that you could raise, we're going to look at all the results and see where we can focus our efforts. And it's not just for Boston residents, it's for people who travel to Boston, visit Boston, work in Boston, anything like that. So it will be available on our website, and we'll blast it out through our email contacts. So again, please be sure to sign up out front with your email address. But I do know people from the Boston Public Schools are here. I don't want to put anybody in a spot. If anybody wants to comment, please just raise your hand and let us know. Question? Comment?
My name is Tom Wood. I'm on the board of directors of Asperger Works. It's a fairly new startup nonprofit. We're based in Lawrence, where we're created by Asperger adults, for Asperger adults. Our focus, we're only just starting to help our first client. But our goal is trying to help with Asperger adults, with 18 and older, obtain and maintain employment throughout the adult lifespan. And there was an issue where once we get more staff, be able to bring in more clients, and also taking the expand programs, because there is a need for employment readiness training, also mentoring, and also just have follow up with adults with high functioning autism, PDD, NOS, and Asperger's throughout the lifespan, while groups such as Mass Rehab, or in my case, I live on a border town and they have the sailing, of course. I do a lot of stuff going into the Massachusetts. We have the issues where the state needs to also look at small nonprofits who can do these types of services better than the state.
Yeah, that brings up a really good point. Another thing I'd like to mention is that our office, like I said, we have such a small staff, we can't do case management. So a lot of times, people who come to us who need a lot of various services, we really work hard to get them a good referral to an agency that works on case management, because we really work on systemic access, meaning that we work with the different departments of the city to try to make sure accessibility and inclusion are parts of their policies and their plans and their programs and their services. But we don't do a lot of individualized services just because we don't have the capacity. So we certainly have referrals that we give to different state agencies and different nonprofit organizations.
Right now, we hired our first job coach, but due to issues that we had with her, we had to fire her. Now we're looking for a new job coach, and it's now just the board of, I'm on the board of directors, and now I and other members of the board of directors are having to take up the slack, with our first client, who was left hanging after only being got one job interview.
Yeah, we know the autism and Asperger's population seems to, really, I don't know if it's growing, like statistically, I don't know if that's true, but we certainly hear more people about it identifying that way, and it's something that we definitely do pay attention to, so thank you for that.
Also, the Asperger high-functioning autism community has a 90% unemployment rate. The average for the entire country is between 75 and 80% across all disabilities.
Yeah, employment is something we also work on along with the summer internships for youth. We also have partnered with Mass Rehab for the last 6 years to offer summer internships for adults with disabilities, Boston residents who are job ready and seeking work. So employment is something we definitely focus on too. Thank you. Jessica?
Great. Next up, we have Dawn Oates.
Hi there.
Hi, Dawn.
My name's Dawn. I'm representing several people who couldn't be here today, various disabilities, and I'm also the parent. Sorry, I don't want to tip over somebody's water. I'm also the parent of a child who has a high spinal cord injury and quadriplegia, so she's a power wheelchair user. First, Liam had a question that I wanted to speak to about Uber from before. Is he still here?
Yep.
He's still here, okay. I actually had a situation, and Uber's response to me I wanted to share because I think there are a lot of people who would benefit from hearing it. I was unable to, I had a driver show up to pick me up, and I had a friend who was a wheelchair user, and they wouldn't let us put his chair in the open, empty trunk. And so I ended up filing a complaint with Uber. He canceled the ride and left, and we were waiting there for a new car. So this woman, Karen, emailed me back, and she said, I just left you a voicemail. She actually called me on the telephone, which is very unusual for Uber. That showed me that they took it very seriously. She called me 3 times before I got back to her. She said, I'm again so sorry to hear about this happening. I really appreciate you taking the time to detail what occurred. I want to reiterate how seriously we take this. I'm going to be taking the appropriate action with your driver right away. Without a doubt, we want to provide a quality platform for everyone. I want to assure you that we're working hard on our end to make sure our partners know and fully understand the expectations when it comes to riders with disabilities. Just like any other law of the land, partners are expected to know that they can't deny riders with assistive devices and/or service animals. If there end up being times when they honestly don't know the law, we educate them. If after educating them we see that they do it again, we will take appropriate action up to and including removing the offending partner from the Uber platform and ending our partnership. If you have any other questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm here to help. Warmest regards, Karen at Uber. So I felt comfortable with that response. I've not had any other issues. And going back to what Liam had said before, it really is up to each of us to advocate, to be self-advocates, and instead of thinking, oh, well, Uber is the bad guy, they showed me that they really did take this very seriously. So moving on from that, one of the things this led me to was taxi service in the city of Boston has been an issue, and I understand that there's a protocol for when someone with a disability or a person traveling with someone with a disability who needs a wheelchair accessible taxi cab calls the taxi company, then they're supposed to dispatch the next available wheelchair accessible cab. Well, many of us in this room know that that could be hours, and we get the runaround and they say, oh, well, I don't have anybody on the road right now, or, I don't know how long it's going to be because all our drivers are out, et cetera, et cetera. And if you still can't get results, there's a police hotline and a person named on the City of Boston website who's an officer who's to attend to that issue. I find that the protocol in writing actually makes a lot of sense, but in execution, it's lacking, and I'm not really sure where that falls apart. Last week, my own van that's accessible broke down, and I drive my daughter to school, and so the night before I called the one taxi company in Boston who is responsible for dispatching all of the accessible taxis in Boston. I'm told that's 13 taxis, but I'm not sure if that number is still accurate. We set up the ride the night before, and then I asked them to be there at 7:30 so my daughter could be at school 6 minutes away by 8 o'clock. And they called me at 7:50 and told me they did not have any cabs and they were trying to wake up drivers to get them out of bed. So we ended up having to borrow the neighbor's minivan and not let her use her power chair for the 4 days that she would have missed school if I didn't send her to school, to be pushed around in a chair that she would have otherwise had independence operating herself. So that's just an anecdote, not to complain, but to illustrate that this isn't just, I'm not going to go to the store. It's people who need to go to doctor's appointments, who need to go to school, and other things that are equally important. So I'd love to see the city's plan focus on how can we fix that taxi service to make it more accessible, whether it's offering incentives for the cab companies to get in compliance, creating a priority system that works and has accountability, or any other ideas. I'd love to, see that happen. I'd also be happy to be involved in that if there were an opportunity there. I have 3 other things that I've been asked to talk about. One is accessible signage. I've noticed that there are a lot of new developments. I'll use the Shake Shack on Newbury Street as an example. I know that I have a friend who's a wheelchair user who felt that he couldn't go to the Shake Shack on Newbury because it wasn't accessible. And I said, that's silly, because we know that anything with a major renovation would have to provide an accessible entrance. So I went and scoped it out myself and saw that from the inside of the restaurant, after you go up those 6 stairs or so to get in, that there's an elevator. So I got on the elevator and it took me out the door of the building next door. So there was no signage at the Shake Shack or the building next door that would indicate this is your accessible entrance to the Shake Shack. So in whatever way possible, if there could be some type of focus on these, it's one thing to have accessible construction, it's another thing to not let the people who need to know where that entrance is. We need to be able to communicate better, I think, in a lot of places, how to get into these new constructions that are accessible, so that we don't feel we're excluding people in the community. Just signage, conversation, better communication around that. Someone asked me to bring up restrooms. This is sort of a fantasy idea. I know, I'm hearing some, sorry, I'm standing right on top of you. There's a lot of issues around restrooms, but the one issue that I was asked to bring up today was the idea that accessible restrooms, yes, are spacious and convenient and they're marked, but I'm not going to be talking about the most obvious issues with the restroom accessibility in public spaces, but this particular issue is this person would love to see a trend of when we do put signage up in accessible restrooms or accessible stalls, that if we could be forward-thinking about educating the public who are not in need of accessible restrooms to not use those stalls if they don't need to, and to use the other available stalls and use the accessible stall as a last resort. Anecdote being another friend who's a wheelchair user went into the restroom, was out having a good time, and couldn't get into the accessible stall fast enough, and had a bowel movement in his pants and had to go home. And so that's no fun for anyone. And he was just waiting for the guy who could have used the stall next door but opted for the bigger restroom. This is sort of an education awareness issue, I think, that the average person who might not need an accessible stall wouldn't necessarily think about that unless they heard that. And hearing that story really helped me understand that I shouldn't use that stall if there's another option. 2 more things. Prioritizing the work orders through Public Works was an issue. Last October, I had a friend who, I had sent a birthday card to him, and he didn't get it for a week, and I said, why aren't you getting your mail for a week? He said, well, the sidewalk has crumbled over near where his mailbox is, which was around the cathedral projects. And I said, well, do you think the city of Boston doesn't want you to get your mail, that they just want you to have a crumbled sidewalk? And have you done anything to advocate for this for yourself and to get the sidewalk repaired? He said, well, no. I said, okay, I'm gonna show you how this is done, and called Public Works and followed up on that and took notes and wrote down who I talked to and all of that. And the process, it was a year later, he called me and said, thank you for my birthday gift, what's that? And he said, oh, you got me a new sidewalk. And that was nice that it got done. I think it was Kristen who alluded, or who spelled out that sometimes things take 2 years. I think that the communication breakdown or lack of awareness of where a project is in the timeline or the pipeline leads to frustration sometimes. So if there were a way to make that more readily available, where that project is in the pipeline, I think people would feel like they're being listened to when you call 311 and okay, this got transferred from DPW to whatever other office, and they're not going to work on it for 3 months because the ground is going to be too hard to pour new concrete or something like that. So if there's a way to escalate accessibility-related requests or complaints above, prioritize them higher than other things rather than a timeline, do you know what I mean? A timeline approach of this call came in first, so we fix it. There's some things that I look at and I think, well, this is kind of more urgent, but is there something that allows the city to see that and step it up the timeline? And then the last thing is, this is sort of personal to me. I've been in Boston since 1994. I had my children 7 years and 5 years ago, respectively. And there's a lot that we do in the city of Boston. I'm very involved in accessible recreation around town. One thing that I haven't done with my family that I think is very nostalgic to me as a child coming to Boston is the Freedom Trail. And I find that it's very difficult to navigate the Freedom Trail with my family and a power wheelchair user, given certain areas. I know that some of the sites and scenes are accessible themselves, but even things like City Hall Plaza and the cobblestones, and I understand there's construction going on at City Hall Plaza, but I'd just love to see us think about, in the planning for the future, how can we take one of the major tourist attractions in our city and use that as a centerpiece to showcase how much we care and are committed to inclusion of people of all abilities by making that accessible to everyone.
Great. Can I stop you there just so I can answer them while it's still on the top of my mind? Because I know that was a lot.
I'm done.
Great. So I'll start with the last one because that's the one I remember the most. We work very closely with the Freedom Trail. In fact, I had an item put in the budget last year to study the Shaw Memorial, which is on the top of Beacon Street across from the State House. So when you're on the Freedom Trail now, you start on Tremont Street at the Visitor Center, and you walk towards, going towards, down Tremont Street towards City Hall Plaza. And one of the first stops is walking towards the Shaw Memorial. But if you're in a wheelchair, you wouldn't know that by the time you get across the Common, there's a flight of stairs to go up to the memorial. So that's one of the first major items on the Freedom Trail. So if you're in a wheelchair, you have to go back, go all the way around, and wheel up the hill. So it probably seems like to most people who aren't engineers or landscape architects that, oh, you can just fix it, but there are so many elements involved in that. But one thing that I did have put in the budget was a feasibility study to see if they could make a vertical connection from the Boston Common up to Beacon Street at that intersection. So they're looking at it right now. It was put into the budget. I know Parks was working on it. Do you know anything about that?
I mean, I know it's happening, but that one isn't one of my projects.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we can follow up on that. But we also work with Suzanne Taylor, who used to work for the City of Boston. She's the executive director of the Freedom Trail, and she's done a lot of work at looking at different accessibility aspects of the Freedom Trail. One thing that the city has changed also that we worked really hard, that I pushed really hard, was to change the line of the Freedom Trail from bricks to the, have you seen like the plastic strip that they use now? Because we know the bricks in the middle of the path of travel is just not accessible. So moving forward, when they do repairs and installations, it's going to go from the brick to the new composite material. So there are a lot of things happening. Again, like you said, they take time. But talking about the sidewalk priorities, when you have an accessibility issue, I would encourage people to call our office as well as 311 Public Works, because Public Works definitely prioritizes accessibility issues. In fact, my architectural access staff and myself just met with Public Works earlier this week to talk about sidewalk priority, reconstruction priorities. The Public Works office uses a matrix to determine priorities, everything from MBTA stops to accessibility, areas of high density of people with disabilities, federal buildings. So it's a list of about 6 items that go in a matrix, and accessibility is one of the 6, and they always push it to the top. So whenever we talk to Public Works, they always prioritize our requests, and they always consider accessibility in all their planning. That being said, people might not know to say it's an accessibility complaint, or it may still take time to reconstruct, because they work out like a 15-year schedule, like in all neighborhoods, and it's a very complicated procedure because, what did they say? We have over 700 miles of sidewalks in the city. I think it's 700 miles of sidewalks. But one thing they will do right away is to come out what they call make repairs to make it safe. So if it's a matter of safety, they will definitely come right out and fix it.
They definitely did that. It took about 3 weeks for them to
Okay.
come out, which I was comfortable with, but then that sort of, it was just really more of a communication
Yeah,
issue.
I mean, it's tough. We do try to tell people that it takes time, but you know what, like I said, call our office. And then what were your other questions? Oh, the taxis. I know the process of getting a taxi is something that we, like I said earlier, we've heard complaints about, we try to work on. It's just, I know it doesn't work right now, so we'll continue to work on that. And was that it?
Signage.
Oh, signage. Yep, that's part of the accessibility checklist that we work on with signage. We agree. And one thing that we do ask, Sarah and Patricia work, you know, in all the pre-file meetings and all the development meetings, and they always bring up signage. Like I said, it's on the checklist. And one thing that we encourage too, and I would tell people to do, is check on the website, because we encourage businesses to put accessibility information on their websites. And if that's a particular complaint, we could always contact the Shake Shack and say, you know, please improve your signage and even put it on the website. So individual issues, please contact us. Systemically, we do work on it, but sometimes it falls through the cracks.
I should update that I did call the Shake Shack and corporate several times, and I didn't hear back from them, but the next time I was there to walk in and see somebody, the signage was up. So they did fix that. So.
And we find that too with developers. They are very willing to work with us. A lot of times it's just, you know, an issue of raising their awareness.
Right, great. Well, thank you.
Thank you. And I did just want to mention too that another board member did join us a few minutes ago, Carl Richardson. Carl, could you just maybe introduce yourself and talk about the work that you do? A little mini bio.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Carl Richardson, and along with being an advisory member for the Boston Disability Commission, I am also the ADA coordinator for the Massachusetts Day House. So if you have any access issues at the Day House, feel free to talk to me at the end.
Thank you. We're going to try to move right along because I know we still have a few people left to speak.
Yeah, so we are supposed to be ending at 4, and we have 7 people still. So I'm going to try and get through everybody. I apologize if I butcher this name. I believe I have Abdig Salam.
I'm going to pass.
Okay. If anybody also has any concerns or comments, our brochures are outside with our email address and our phone number. Feel free, if you would feel more comfortable reaching out to us directly, please feel free to do so. There's also a list of all of the A-grade wheelchair accessible vehicles. I believe the total is up to 44. They are all listed by medallion number out front on a brochure. But right now we have Angela Francis.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Hi. Luckily, I wrote these questions down. So I didn't bring my glasses. So one of the questions that I had is, what does accessibility mean? Especially to individuals who have unseen disabilities. And then sensory units, what do they mean? And the reason why I asked that question is because I had asked my property manager, they're building a new building close to where I live, and I said to her, well, what is that kind of unit? And all she could tell me was that it was for people who had eyesight problems. Okay. And I'm thinking perhaps maybe a person with like autism or Asperger's might be able to use a sensory unit. And then in terms of equity amongst individuals with disabilities, what does that look like for people with unseen disabilities? And then I think I'll just leave it there.
Okay.
I'll just let y'all answer those because I have a few more, but I'll just ask later.
So when you say what does accessibility mean, there's a myriad of answers to that. But for our office's priorities, we certainly prioritize architectural access because it's the law. We also are required to have access to all our programs and services. So if it's not architectural access, it's communication access. We're required to produce documents in different formats upon request. sign language, cart, we have large print materials available. We also we advertise our events as scent-free for people with chemical sensitivity. We do pay attention to things like seating, leaving priority access in the front. And as far as the built-out units for sensory disabilities, I wonder if Patricia or Sarah could comment on that. I know that under the new housing policy that we're working on right now with the mayor, we are going to have 8%, the new 10% requirement, 8% are going to be physical accessibility built out, and 2% are going to be sensory accessibility. So Sarah's right behind you. She can speak to that.
And can I just say one thing to the 2%? That might be a little difficult because there are a lot of individuals within the community that are suffering with things such as autism or Asperger's or conditions that are along that line where they need more of those types of...
Let's let Sarah speak to that.
Hi, for the sensory units, generally it means that provisions are provide visual aids in terms of alarms or telecommunication processes. So visual alarms in lieu of auditory alarms and things of that nature that are more visual and sensitive to those of hard hearing.
So I'm not aware of any housing modifications for people with autism or Asperger's, but it's certainly something that we can look into. Are you familiar with any, Robert? No? Okay. So that's new territory for us. Patricia, does the AAB have any guidance on that?
Not at this time. The AAB covers architectural barrier, physical barriers.
Okay.
And there's some provisions for the hearing impaired and visual impaired. But,
okay.
This is something, thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, that's new to us, but we'll definitely look into it.
Look into it.
Thank you.
Sure. So what I mean by that is, so for example, there are some people that are highly sensitive to sound. And you'll see.
A sensory unit would be a nightmare for them. I live in a modified unit that is also designated as a sensory unit for, within the Boston Housing Authority. And I have flashers and klaxon alarms inside of my apartment. For me, I needed that, but I can tell you from a sensory standpoint, as an autistic person, it would send you into a meltdown.
So under fair housing laws, that could be something that could be a reasonable accommodation on an individual basis. So I know that we would certainly promote that and support that.
Now, I'm going to go just a little further with it. So there's an individual that I know right now that has been dealing with an issue in a new development where they didn't take into proper thought what the doors would, the sound of the doors, the sound is horrendous.
So again, I think that would be a reasonable accommodation. Yeah. But maybe we could talk offline about the individual case. Thank you. Jessica?
I had already prepped him. The next individual is John Kelly.
Oh, great.
Kristen, members of the board, is it on? Yeah. My name is John Kelly. I work with Second Thoughts Massachusetts, Disability Rights Advocates Against Assisted Suicide. I thank the board for your past support of our efforts to stop assisted suicide in the legislature and at the ballot. And I look forward to speaking to the board in the next few months over the current bills. And I have flyers in my bag if anyone is interested in knowing more about this subject and why it's such a crucial issue to the disability community. I'd also like to thank the board or ask for more information about the new construction standard for sidewalks, which I understand is the saw-cut, very narrow joints, and would like to know more about that. And if it is the new standard, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, because many sidewalks are, even new sidewalks are unbearable because the joints are like the GW Bridge, where it's just gathunka, 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 headaches ensue. So thank you.
Yes, that is in the sidewalk policy. Since I was appointed in 2010, I've worked extensively with Public Works on the sidewalks, and it was actually good timing because right around the time of my appointment, the Public Works Commission was looking at the Complete Streets model. It's a very detailed model with very specific design of sidewalks, really meant to give the roadways back to pedestrians rather than vehicles. I came in under Mayor Menino, and he had actually made a declaration in like 2007, I think, that the car was no longer king in Boston. So we really made an effort to give those roadways back to pedestrians. So the sidewalk policy is available on the Public Works website. Also, the Complete Streets, very detailed specifications for sidewalks is available. And basically, it calls for, like I said earlier, the sidewalks divided into 3 zones: pedestrian, the curb, and the frontage zone. The pedestrian zone is basically off limits to everything. We only support concrete, and where there's room, it's a 5-foot wide path of travel. Sarah and Patricia will tell you that we battle with developers on a weekly basis who come in and want to do something fancy in the path of travel. Since the sidewalk policy was implemented about 4 years ago, we have not approved one design that interferes with the path of travel. So the path of travel is 5 feet, concrete, saw cut, and a story.
Thank you very much.
Great. Next, we have Carol Steinberg.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carol Steinberg. I was on the Architectural Access Board for 8 years until July. I guess what I want to do is just give you a heads up and hear what Kristen and the board have to say. Most of you, I think, know about the importance of the Architectural Access Board. This has been making buildings accessible in this state since 1968, 22 years before the ADA. And we do it through the building code. To Olivia's point, you don't have to bring a lawsuit. It's supposed to be through the building code when there's new construction or substantial renovation. 30% is our standard.
But our building code doesn't even meet with the ADA.
Okay, so let me just address that and address a few other things. There's legislation, which you have helped me lobby for. We filed it again this year, and we really feel like it could get passed this year to make them in sync with the ADA about employee spaces, having jurisdiction over employee spaces. That being said, there's a feeling in the people in the disability community I know, and members of the AAB, there's there's a scuttlebutt that there are forces in the state that don't like the AAB. I mean, I think that's probably always been the case, but I'm sorry, the Architectural Access Board. And and the reorganization that Governor Baker recently did takes the Architectural Access Board out of the Department of Public Safety. And in fact, I think it does away with public safety altogether and puts it under another place. There are regulations. We have been trying to revise 521 CMR, which and update it for a long time, and they've been stuck in administration and finance in the state. And this legislation, there's a lot of pushback on that. So there are feelings that there are forces that are trying to reduce the effectiveness of the AAB that we all depend on so much. And I know Kristen and the board have been for us, and Patricia is a member. So I guess I just want to give you a heads up that at some point there's going to have to be some visibility, because I think a lot of people out there don't know how important the AAB is.
So I can just recap really quickly. The AAB is the Architectural Access Board. It's a state board. It's under the Department of Public Safety, and they're in charge of overseeing the building code that deals with accessibility in all buildings. So it's kind of like a local ADA, so to speak, in that the ADA is a federal law. They have accessibility guidelines that buildings have to follow. But in order to have the ADA enforced, if something was built incorrectly, it would be a federal lawsuit through the DOJ. Whereas we're so lucky to have the AAB, because if something was built incorrectly, all we have to do is contact the AAB and file a complaint. So it's an incredibly valuable board, and we were lucky, my office, incredibly lucky, after 5 years of pushing for it, we finally had a staff member appointed to the AAB. So Patricia Mendez, our architectural access specialist, sits on the board, so she gets to hear all these issues and weigh in on them with her expertise, and also bring the issues back to us so we know what's happening across Boston and across the state. So Patricia does a great job in relaying all this information. She has worked with the board to keep them updated, and I believe the board wrote a letter of support for 521 CMR to remain as is, and so we're watching this issue closely, and I would encourage the public to keep tabs on it too, because something we definitely don't want is for the AAB to go away, because it's really an invaluable tool for people with disabilities in maintaining access, creating access and maintaining access. So thank you.
So I guess what I would say is just, write to your legislators and everything and just tell them about the importance of the AAB, and if the board can just keep weighing in, because I don't know what's going to happen, and maybe, I don't know if you know any more of what's going to happen, but
we're all watching
closely.
closely.
Make the public aware of how important it is.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Can you get them, Mike?
I have a question. I wasn't going to say anything, but I have a question. This is Angie. Well, I'll start it out with a statement. Since I thought you were just doing Boston, but you mentioned all over the state.
Statewide. Yeah.
Are construction workers required to have different types of equipment so that it's barrier-free? Because in my town, there's a lot of construction going on, and they're building a restaurant. And people put up visual signs, and they don't like to explain what they're doing. It's not like certain towns out here that explain things, and sometimes they'll take breaks and walk away if they're not there. And it's because they're building a restaurant, they moved our bank down, and they've gotten a little better, but they put cones around this big step. There was a big gaping step, a big hole. So I had to call out to somebody, and nobody was around at that time. Luckily, I was using my cane.
What town are you from?
Salem.
Salem.
There was no fence around it, but they had cones, and some caution tape.
Are
they allowed to? Can they put barriers around it so that if they have to dig a hole or a cone, they can just put a fence around it so nobody gets hurt?
I know that compliant barricades for temporary construction are required. I'm not sure if it's AAB or ADA. AAB.
Requires that. Can I just? I just wanted to say to you and also to Dawn. Is Dawn still here? She is. The file complaints, like your situation with the Shake Shack, that's a complaint with the AAB, and they will address it, and the construction issue as well.
And you can do them right online, is that correct?
Yes, and you can do it
Not
online.
everybody has email. You didn't have email when you had it. You had all that paper out there, so you might as well do it whenever you have until you get it online.
Or you could call and they can assist
I
you.
had a question about it. I thought maybe since you stood up there and you were speaking so well that you had a little bit of knowledge about it. Evidently, you didn't quite answer my question, because I'm saying this as a person because you travel daily, and I'm sure you encounter daily construction like at North Station and everywhere else. So I figured you'd be able to answer a little bit.
Yeah, and I am answering. The AAB, the regulations.
It just didn't seem that way. That's why I mean.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Also, the local building department should be able to enforce that. So call the local building inspectors in Salem.
You'd be able to know which be able to answer. So you don't know, because some of the mobility teachers do know, but you say you do a lot of access, and you should be able to answer at least part of that question. Thank you. But yes,
Jessica?
I will look into that.
Great.
But you can help, and if you don't want to help, then don't have a forum, because you brought it up, and I just figured I'd ask.
Great, next we have Timothy.
It's not just an issue, it's an issue all over the state, unless you want to fall and go into a hospital.
I'm a little bit nervous, but I'll go for it. I just wanted to thank you for your time and your voice and your passion here. I also wanted to introduce myself. I'm working at the Institute for Human Design, Human-Centered Design. And that really has become an open door for me. I'm Timothy Ip, and I've been doing an internship there. And the internship that I've experienced has really shown a lot of passion for human-centered design and accessibility. I'm from RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology, and I majored in design. I always wanted to be an architect and work on architecture growing up. And when I was in college, I realized that we needed to include culture in design. So I decided to take that degree of culture and design. And so I majored in design and architecture. And I wanted to learn more about culture, the intersection of culture and architecture and design, and where the barriers are in that, why culture and architectural design are separated. There's some designers that look down upon architects, and some architects who look down upon designers. And what I'm hearing today is there's still so many barriers. I want to grow a culture of partnership between architects and designers. To not be pointing fingers and blaming, we're equally responsible for what we do. And so sometimes when I took design courses, there would be nothing included about ADA. We need to be a voice for architecture to change. We need to pave the way. I also wanted to thank Carl for showing me the State House and showing me around there. I really appreciate that. And the reception at BCIL, I just wanted to thank you for showing me the access that was there. And I wanted to give you all a quote. There's many people, but we don't have the same disabilities. And what would happen if we do become disabled in a different way? How would we face those barriers? So now, thanks to my work at the Institute for Human-Centered Design, I'm more aware about accessibility. I'm also trying to learn more about architecture and design and how we can form that partnership. That we are all responsible for each other. Architects are responsible for the design, and design responsible for the architects. We need to be in collaboration. We're not necessarily wrong or right. If we're thinking about outside architecture and we're thinking about inner design of buildings, we need to set up a way for all people to be able to access from the outside to the inside. And of course, there's historical aspects of preserving history inside and outside of buildings. But part of that is adapting to universal design. I feel so blessed for my time in college because of studying design and architecture and discovering universal design. I'd love to speak with more of the board members, and I'm interested in being involved in how we can meet people's expectations for design and architecture in the future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much for your comments, and I'm glad that you weren't too nervous to get up and say them, because it's really important to hear. I would like to say that I hear all the time from architects, my staff, that ADA is not emphasized in college programs. So I'm glad that you found it and you're in the field, and I can see that you'll be one of our champions moving forward. We would love to have you more involved with our board and our work, and I would personally like to offer you a tour of City Hall, the access at City Hall. It's not great, but it's much improved. And that is another good point I'd like to bring out. One of our handouts in the hall is an accessibility guide to City Hall. Patricia put that together last year. It shows the accessible entrances, accessible bathrooms, talks about T-stops to get to City Hall, where the captioning is. We're also working on installing 2 hearing loops and automatic doors. So please come to City Hall and see the features there. And thanks, Carl, for that tour of the State House. I know City Hall was built probably 100 years after the State House, and it's much less accessible. But hopefully designers like you moving forward can design much more accessibility-friendly buildings. So again, thank you, and
I was at an event,
welcome.
it was pretty much accessible, the ramp, that you have going into it.
Great. And I think we have one more speaker left,
Yep,
which is right about on time. So
Yeah, we've got one more. I believe it's Kevin Heaton.
Hi, my name's Kevin. I'm a member of Mass Adapt, but separate from that, I'm trying to get some folks to come to the rally for public education on May 20th on Boston Common at 2 o'clock. Trying to get some people there to show the importance of public education for people with disabilities. So if anyone's interested, let me know at the end of this. Thanks.
thank you, Kevin. And like I said, we need to wrap it up in the next few minutes, because we only have ASL and CART until 4, and I want to be aware of people's time. So I'd just like to ask the board if they have any final comments before we wrap it up.
I want to add, as an advocate, one of the most important things, of course, is getting our voice heard. And I'm proud to say that the main council chamber at Boston City Hall is now going to be accessible, wheelchair accessible. Before, you had to go down a crazy ramp. And now they are literally raising the floor of the Boston City Council to bring it up to a level surface. So now there literally is no reason not to go and give your testimony to the Boston City Council when local issues come up.
We also have captions at all the meetings, TV with live captions. So we've really worked hard to try to make the City Council chamber accessible and City Council meetings accessible. So yes, please come in. We work for you, please remember that, and your voices are not only welcome, but they're encouraged.
I have a 10-second question. Who's in charge of crosswalks, traffic, or public works?
Crosswalks is Public Works.
Is there a public
Actually,
works
is that right, Patricia? Actually, it's a combination of both. Yeah.
Can somebody from either of those departments see me before they leave, please?
We can have, yeah, Patricia can talk to you. Zari, any final comments? Kimyara, Kyle, Carl? Okay, thank you all for coming, and
I have one quick announcement. Sorry, Commissioner. I just have one. Sorry, I see people standing up. Sorry about that. I just wanted to announce that currently the Office of State Rep Dan Cullinane, they have an intern from the Cotting School
who is conducting research on the ride experience, specifically people who have had positive or negative experiences in the ride, to participate and fill out a survey. So if you are interested in being involved in that, please reach out to Dan Cullinan's office. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. Oh, ADA Day is July 25th on City Hall Plaza.